Ross Greenwood, your analysis. We see a bit of a grim picture from Jim Chalmers again in this budget. He's warned us in the lead up to this October budget that that's the international environment. What's your read on it? Is he right?
He's been downright pessimistic in the lead up to this budget. Some people have said he's almost been talking the economy down. But what you see in this budget is the reality of where Australia sits right now. And Australia, to be honest, is actually probably sitting on a fairly narrow and slippery path. And in this budget might determine whether we plough on in the economy or whether we do slip into the abyss of a recession. And it's in the next 24 hours as the Treasurer sells this budget and his message that you'll know which way the markets are thinking about this. I do note at the moment, say for example, interest rates on money markets coming down as it comes out. But the wild point about this is whether we head down the path of the soft landing or off it into some form of recession. Now, there's no Australian recession forecast, but the R word is used repeatedly. In this document alone, 14 times, but typically to describe the economic conditions in Europe, the UK and America, but not here, the Treasurer says. In a worst case scenario, though, he admits it's going to be very, very close. The danger time, though, is not now. It's going to be in around 18 months' time, because you can see here, this is here the scenario that predicts a hard landing in the global economies, but sees Australia, as you can see, that red line here is actually tipping dangerously close to a recession in mid-2024. That's partly due to rising inflation, which the budget predicts will peak at 7.75%. But also take a look at inflation around the world. Generally, it's already higher. New Zealand, 7.2%, US, 8.2%, the UK, 10.1%. But with that as a guide, the Treasurer also gives a worst-case scenario that inflation could peak at 8.75%, keeping interest rates in Australia much higher for much, much longer. So fast forward to the first half of next year, interest rates will have also peaked. That's according to the most optimistic scenario. The document uses market forecasts that the Reserve Bank will raise rates by another 0.75%. Most people's mortgage will then increase to more than 5%. And as those rates rise and as the economy slows down, more people eventually, inevitably, are going to lose their job. So unemployment right now is full. It's brilliant. 3.5%. It's why so many people are surviving. But it's tipped to rise to 4.5% in 2023-24. Now, you work that out, it's 140,000 Australians who now have a job who will either be sacked or who will be out of the workforce. And the odd part of this is that the government's plan to spend $1 billion to provide that fee-free TAFE courses that Laura talked about might mean that people who train for 3 or 4 years, we're looking at carpenters, plumbers, whatever it might be, they'll come out of their course into a very different economic and employment environment. Finding a job for some of them is going to be increasingly difficult. So in other words, the plan is right, but the timing might be wrong. The economic pain as painted by this budget does not end there for families or businesses who rely on their consumption. It shows a collapse in household savings as families use their reserves. You can see it here. This is the household savings ratio collapsing. This is families using their reserves to soak up higher costs, especially for electricity, as Andrew talked about, and rising interest rates. Families are going to feel it first, then the businesses who rely on those families' consumption. Now, in the past, Australia's economy and government revenues have been saved by booming commodity prices. But, as Andrew pointed out, not this time, and certainly according also to the Treasurer. So, the budget forecast, as Andrew said, iron ore to slump from $91 to $55 a tonne. For coal, for steelmaking, to halve from $271 to $130 a tonne. Coal used to generate electricity from $438 a tonne to just $60, which seems almost impossible. And LNG from $934 a tonne to $630. But if all these numbers are beyond you, the bottom line is that things are going to get tighter. Simply hang on to your job. And one final point you might have to take in with all these budget numbers with a grain of salt, because the 2022-23 budget, we discovered, analyses errors that have been made in previous budgets. And they go back 20 years, Andrew. You might be interested to know this. It also shows that the past 4 budgets were each, the past 4 budgets out of the last 20 years were each the least accurate budgets over the past
Ross,
generation.
Does that go to the very point of the international environment that this government finds itself in, and that is the volatility of the international economy? Hence, what we've seen in recent times, it's impossible to predict.
Well, there's your problem. But then why have a budget? If you can't predict it,
bow Stephen Kennedy, Treasury Secretary.
Well, see, there is your point, though. You've had the worst 4 budget, or least accurate budgets in the past 4. So therefore, you know, as we try to plan, as the Treasurer tries to plan the economy into the future, as we try and work out, are we going into recession, are we not? Are there more jobs or less jobs? These are the keys that people need to know. So you'd hope that these forecasts might eventually come closer to being more accurate.
Well,